A lot of people, when they hear the words employee engagement, they have very different reactions. Many people say, oh, this is just the latest corporate buzzword or a management fad. I think Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, captures it really well. It's funny because it's true. So what is engagement? Well, there's many different uses of the term. This right here is a symbol. Several years ago, I cashed out all of the savings that I had to buy one of these and to present it to my sweetheart as a symbol of the commitment I was willing to make of my whole person forever to her. Luckily, she said yes. And 9 years and 5 kids later, including 2 sets of twins, but that's a whole different story. Here we are. Another popular use of the term comes from this man, who, when sitting on the bridge of the Starship Enterprise and ready to jump to warp speed, would raise the finger and, see if I can do it, would say, engage. I worked on that impression for a while. A third meaning of the term is derived from this device right here. This is a yoke, and it's used to harness a pair of oxen together to pull a load. And what's fascinating about it is that when 2 oxen harnessed together and properly trained pull a load, they can pull more than double the combined weight of the 2 oxen pulling alone. So I go back to the original definition about what is employee engagement given by Bill Kahn when he did a study to define this term in work contexts for the first time nearly 25 years ago. He described engagement as people harnessing themselves to their work roles and employing and expressing their energy physically, emotionally, and cognitively. And you see a lot of the dynamics from those analogies that we just described in this definition. People committing their whole selves, getting themselves in gear, or harnessing themselves to their load. Another simpler way of understanding the term is that when people are engaged, they're working with their hands, their head, and their heart. The whole person is involved. So when I think about what it means to engage, you see people who are completely there. They bring all of themselves to their work role. They're not just robotically present, going through the motions, but they bring their whole selves to their work role. And where does it come from? So, as in our analogies, it takes more than one person. It takes 2 to engage. So there's a role for the individuals as well as for the organization. And based on lots of research that has been done, there are 3 main factors that predict whether people are willing to invest themselves fully in their work role. First, when people feel a sense of meaning, or they know how what they do makes a difference in their organization and makes a difference in the world, they're more likely to invest themselves. And organizations can help people know and feel the value of what they do. Second, when people feel a sense of support or freedom to be who they really are, and they feel security, that they can take the risks of initiative without fearing the negative consequences, then they're more likely to invest their whole selves in their work roles. And third, when people feel a sense of competence, that they know what they're doing, they know how to do their job and they do it well. Or if they don't, they know where and how they can find the resources to get better, then they're more likely to fully invest themselves in their work roles. If you're familiar at all with a book called Drive by Dan Pink, he calls these same 3 factors feeling a sense of purpose, a sense of autonomy, and a sense of mastery. And the research shows that as people feel a sense of these things, they're much more likely to invest themselves completely in their work roles. Now, this is where the Working at Iowa survey comes in. If you're familiar with the questions, you'd astutely observe that this survey does not actually measure employees' engagement. It's not asking them about how they invest their energy at work. It's not asking about whether they work with their hands, their head, and their heart. Instead, the questions are geared around getting a sense of whether employees feel these things, meaning, support, and competence at work. For example, here's 2 questions from the survey that help assess meaning. I understand how my job fits into the overall mission of the University of Iowa, or my unit goals are clear. Here's 2 questions that help get a sense of whether they feel support. For example, my unit provides a supportive environment to retain individuals from diverse backgrounds, or I can speak openly about work-related concerns with my supervisor. People that respond positively to these questions feel support at work. People that don't respond positively to these questions, they feel unsafe at work. So they don't bring up concerns with their supervisors. And then in terms of competence, questions from the survey, I'm encouraged to participate in professional development, or the feedback I receive from my supervisor helps to improve my performance. They have ways to learn how to do their job well and know when they aren't. And the presumption again is that as employees feel these things, meaning, support, and competence, they're more likely to invest their full selves in their work roles. Now that's where engagement comes from. The next question is, does it matter? And another way of answering this question is asking, well, are employees who are really engaged, do they exhibit superior job performance? Because if they don't, then engagement is nice and well and fine, but it really doesn't matter much. So I did a study with some colleagues several years ago. It's been published and cited over 300 times, designed to answer this question. And we asked ourselves, not only do employees exhibit superior performance in terms of doing their regular job well, but do they also do those extra mile behaviors, the voluntary things that aren't written in their job description, but as they do them, they make a big difference to the unit's success. So we looked at both of these factors. Also, we had supervisors rate these things, not whether employees felt that, oh, I do a good job and I go the extra mile. We actually asked someone else, tell us about this employee, how well they do their job and whether they go the extra mile. Now, there's a lot of reasons employees might have superior job performance, not just because they're engaged. For example, it might just be that they're more satisfied with their job. And research shows that people that are happier at work tend to be higher performers. It could also be that they identify strongly with their job, so that what they do is a big part of who they are. And as people feel like that's a big part of their identity, they're more willing to do a better job at work. It could just be that they're more interested in their work. And as employees do more enjoyable work, research has shown, they tend to have better performance. So we measured all of these different explanations as well as the employee's sense of whether they felt meaning, support, and competence at work. And what we found is that of those 4, truly being engaged was the only one that had any relationship at all with whether employees did their regular job well and whether they would go the extra mile. And none of these others had any relationship at all. So in this study, yeah, engagement makes a difference, and it was the only one that made a difference for job performance. Of course, this is just one study. We only had 245 employees, and if you know everything about science, really, one study doesn't tell you hardly anything. You need bigger studies with more samples. So let me point you to some additional research. This has been done by the University of Iowa's own Frank Schmidt, who is faculty here in the Tippie College of Business. He's now emeritus faculty. And with his colleagues over at the Gallup organization, they studied nearly 1 million employees all across the world, over 30,000 business units. And they compared business units in terms of responses to a survey that's similar to the Working at Iowa survey. It assesses things like meaning, support, and competence. And they compared business units whose responses put them at the 75th percentile versus those that were at the 25th percentile. So higher versus lower performers on these questions. And what they found in terms of business results for these business units, and these come from every industry you can think of, they exhibited 18% higher productivity, 49% lower turnover, 37% less absenteeism, 49% fewer injuries, 41% fewer patient safety incidents, 27% less theft. I mean, what about just going from slightly below average to slightly above average? You don't even have to move from the 25th to the 75th percentile to find, if you even go from the 40th to the 60th percentile on this survey, your business unit is 20% more likely to achieve above average performance according to a composite of these metrics than if you stayed below average. So this evidence suggests that having an engaged workforce actually makes a very big difference. This here is Chip Conley. He's the CEO of the Joie de Vivre Hospitality, Inc. They operate a chain of 36 boutique hotels in California. And when they took over the Hotel Carlton in San Francisco, they had a big problem. In particular, they couldn't retain their staff. One of the housekeepers commented that you can tell a lot about management by the kind of vacuum we use. And one of the problems was that the prior management refused to replace the aging vacuums of the housekeeping staff despite continuous complaints. So the very first thing they did when they took over was they bought brand new vacuums for every one of the housekeepers, and then they replaced them every year. Chip Conley talks about his philosophy to make Joie de Vivre hotels an engaging place to work at. For example, reading from the article that was written about him, Joie de Vivre sponsors parties, awards. They arrange paid annual retreats for employees. They have regular dinners with those who want to chat. The company offers free classes on subjects ranging from Microsoft Excel to English as a second language, which for their hotel keeping staff, that's the most popular course. It pushes their managers to seek feedback from their workers, and they encourage their employees to learn how their jobs make a difference for hotel guests and for the company. So to quantify how big a difference this makes, let's just look at one outcome. It's the hidden cost of turnover. My background is actually in accounting. I was an accountant before I got my PhD in management. And the hidden cost of turnover doesn't show up on any income statement. You won't see it represented on a balance sheet. But it makes a big difference. For example, Joie de Vivre employs 2,500 people. And the industry average of turnover, and the average turnover that they were experiencing at this particular hotel, is 66%. That means every single year you have to replace 1,500 of your 2,500 employees. And they estimate for their industry, in terms of the lost productivity and the cost of hiring and training a new replacement, it's about $5,000. So doing simple multiplication, you see that the annual hidden cost of turnover, if they were at the industry average turnover rate, is over $8 million. Now, because of the way Joie de Vivre runs their hotels, with the things I described, their turnover rate is actually 30%. So what that means in terms of the annual turnover cost, it's only $3.7 million, which is still a lot. But that's an annual savings every year of $4.5 million. That more than pays for brand new vacuums for each of the hotel staff every year. So what about the University of Iowa? What about our turnover rate? Well, I've gotten some help with some numbers from the Human Resources Department. The University of Iowa employs about 17,000 benefits eligible employees, and the university-wide turnover rate is 9.4%. Now, what's our replacement cost? Is it just $5,000? We do things that are a little more complicated than what hotel housekeepers do. So the university's actually done a study to figure out, on average, what would it cost to replace each employee? And again, in the same factors in terms of the lost productivity and hiring and training replacement and their productivity lapses while they get up to speed. These estimates come from the Human Resources Department. For merit employees, the predicted total cost of a single turnover is about $41,000. For a professional and scientific employee, it's nearly double that. Now, most professional experts estimate that the true hidden cost of turnover per employee is anywhere from 2 to 3.5 times an employee's annual salary. And given that the annual salary on average for merit employees here at the University of Iowa is about $41,000, at one time the annual salary, this is actually a pretty conservative estimate. It seems large, but it could be so much worse. So let's just take the conservative end of these numbers and take the cost at $41,000. So what would the University of Iowa's annual hidden cost of turnover be? About $65 million. but it could be worse. The college or division in the university that has the highest turnover rate is actually 18.1%. So what if the whole university were at that level? Our annual hidden cost of turnover would be $120 million and change. That's an additional annual cost of over $60 million compared to the average at 9.4%. Now, it could be much better. For example, the division or unit that has the lowest annual turnover rate in the university is 4.9%. So what if the whole university were at that level? Well, the hidden cost would be in the ballpark of $34 million. Again, which is a lot. But compared to the average, that's about $30 million of annual savings. So when you ask yourself, do these employee engagement initiatives and the Working at Iowa survey, do they make a difference? Well, the difference between having a really engaged workforce and a not so engaged workforce at the University of Iowa, just compare the difference in turnover costs between the highest rate and the lowest rate. And if someone asks you, does it matter? I'll give you 92 million reasons why it matters. And this is just looking at one of the performance indicators, just turnover. This says nothing about absenteeism or injuries or safety or theft. So we have the potential to make a very big difference. You can do these same calculations for your own units with the help from your human resources. You have these numbers in the key performance indicators that are sent to your senior human resource representatives. And if you miss copying down any of these numbers, I can get them to you afterward. So, when it comes to the Working at Iowa survey, how should you think about it? More than anything, it's a conversation starter. We're asking people for their opinions about whether they feel like they have a sense of meaning, of support, and of competence. And then we presume that if they do, they're more likely to be engaged. But the survey is just the start. Where the engagement really comes about is in this follow-up, one-on-one conversations, small group discussions, and large group meetings where you talk about what are our unit's strengths in terms of meaning, in terms of competence, in terms of support. When you have high scores, you should be celebrating those successes because they're not guaranteed. If you have a really engaging place to work, that takes a lot of effort to create and sustain. So you should celebrate those successes. What makes this place special to work? How did we create that? How can we preserve that? Also, as through the survey results you identify areas for improvement, those present great opportunities to have conversations about what can we do to improve. And small conversations aggregated over time with small changes that are made end up creating very big differences.